Daehyun adjusted the illumination on his scanner, careful not to damage the fragile manuscript beneath it. The chamber's stale air carried the scent of millennia, undisturbed until his archaeological team had breached the sealed vault on this forgotten moon of Talaris Prime. The blue glow of his equipment cast eerie shadows across the ancient walls, where symbols unlike any known language sprawled in intricate patterns. For 3 weeks, his team had worked tirelessly to reach this hidden chamber. 2 researchers had already left, convinced the expedition was a waste of resources. But Daehyun had persisted, following clues scattered across half a dozen star systems. His dedication had finally led them here, to a moon that official records claimed held nothing of value. "Any progress?" Ju asked, her voice echoing slightly as she entered the makeshift laboratory. Her tall, slender form ducked beneath the low entrance, the specialized environmental suit she wore humming softly as it adjusted to the chamber's atmosphere. As the team's xenolinguist, she had spent countless hours helping Daehyun decipher the fragments they found on other worlds. "These texts are extraordinary," Daehyun replied, not looking up from his work. His fingers moved with practiced precision over the controls, adjusting the scanner's sensitivity. They describe beings called humans with remarkable capabilities. According to this, they could survive radiation levels that would kill most known species, heal from grievous injuries, and endure environmental extremes that seem biologically impossible. The scanner beeped, completing its analysis of the current section. Images formed in the holographic display above the manuscript, showing bizarre creatures walking upright on 2 limbs, with no protective scales, no secondary breathing apparatus, and skin as vulnerable as a newborn trillion. Ju frowned, her emerald scales shifting color slightly, a sign of skepticism among the Cerulean people. Another creation myth, then. Every ancient civilization has them. She moved closer, her 4-fingered hand hovering over the display to rotate one of the images. "These look like the Skywalkers from Gandalian mythology, or perhaps related to the Eternal Ones the Praxi worship." "I don't think so," Daehyun said, finally looking up. His normally bright yellow scales had dulled from weeks of minimal rest, but his eyes shone with excitement. "The specificity is unlike anything I've seen. Detailed anatomical descriptions, mathematical formulations of their biology, even star charts showing their supposed home system." He tapped a command, and the display shifted to show astronomical calculations of remarkable complexity. "Look at this," he continued, enthusiasm growing in his voice. "These aren't vague religious texts. They describe a bipedal species with internal temperature regulation, capable of surviving in atmospheres with oxygen content ranging from 15 to 25%. They detail a digestive system that could process both plant and animal matter. They even explain how these humans could run for hours without rest, healing from wounds that would be fatal to most species." Ju moved beside him, her scientific curiosity finally piqued. "That level of detail is unusual," she admitted, studying the scrolling text as the scanner continued its work. "But it could still be fiction. Perhaps an ancient author with a vivid imagination and unusual knowledge of biology." Daehyun shook his head. "There's more. The text references technological achievements, energy weapons, faster than light travel, planetary terraforming, all supposedly created by these humans, and all described with technical specifications." He brought up another section of the text, where diagrams showed machines of impossible complexity. "Have you carbon-dated the materials?" Ju asked, professional skepticism returning to her voice. "Multiple times. The physical manuscript dates back approximately 12,000 years, but the language and star charts suggest the information itself is much older, perhaps 30,000 years or more." Daehyun's scales rippled with excitement, a bright blue flash racing across his neck and shoulders. Ju stepped back, crossing her arms. "Daehyun, you know how the Council will respond to this. Elder Minji has already warned you about pursuing fringe theories after that incident with the Proxima artifacts. "This is different," Daehyun insisted. "These texts reference specific locations, specific events. If they're accurate, we could find physical evidence of these humans. We could rewrite the entire history of galactic civilization." But Daehyun couldn't let it go. That night, in his small apartment in the academic district, he studied the translated texts again, focusing on one particular passage. They came from the third world of a yellow star, walking upright on two legs, their soft skin hiding strength that defied reason. And when the great darkness came, they alone stood against it. The great darkness. The texts mentioned it repeatedly, some catastrophic event that had threatened all life in the galaxy. According to the manuscripts, these humans had somehow prevented total destruction, at great cost to themselves. If true, every living being in the galaxy owed their existence to a species now forgotten, relegated to myth and dismissed as fiction. Daehyun activated his personal communication array, connecting to the secure academic network. If the council wouldn't support his research officially, he would need to find another way. Perhaps private funding, or collaboration with researchers outside council jurisdiction. As the system connected, he noticed a new message waiting, sent anonymously through multiple relays to avoid tracking. The message contained only coordinates and a single line of text. For those who seek the truth about the Star Walkers. Daehyun's scales flashed bright blue with excitement. Someone else believed. Someone else had found evidence. The coordinates pointed to a system at the edge of explored space, a place rarely visited and largely ignored by mainstream archaeology. Daehyun began calculating what resources he would need for such a journey, knowing it could end his academic career or validate everything he believed about these mysterious humans. The truth was out there among the stars, hidden in ruins and ancient texts, waiting for someone brave enough to find it. And Daehyun was determined to be that someone, whatever the cost. 6 months after his humiliation before the council, Daehyun found himself on the frozen moon of Eridani IV, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of his environmental suit. The journey had consumed nearly all his personal savings and what little remained of his academic reputation. The small research vessel he chartered sat a kilometer behind them, its heat signature the only warm spot on the barren landscape of ice and rock. Zhuwu had reluctantly accompanied him, more out of concern for his deteriorating career than belief in his theories. She trudged beside him now, her normally bright emerald scales dulled to a protective dark green within her transparent helmet, a biological response to conserve heat. "The cold will kill us before we find your mythical humans," she grumbled as they trudged across the icy landscape. Their boots crunched through the brittle surface, occasionally breaking through to sink ankle-deep in powdery snow beneath. "This moon has been surveyed 3 times in the last century. No one found anything worth reporting." "Those surveys were automated resource assessments," Daehyun replied, his eyes fixed on the portable scanner in his gloved hands. "They were looking for mineral deposits, not archaeological sites." He paused, adjusting the device's settings. Besides, the ancient texts specifically mentioned repositories of knowledge, hidden beneath frozen worlds where no life would disturb them. "This moon matches 7 distinct criteria from the manuscripts." Zhuwu sighed, the sound hissing through her suit's communication system. 7 criteria that you interpreted from texts that the entire council dismissed as mythology. "The scanner is picking up metallic concentrations beneath that ridge," Daehyun replied, pointing ahead to where the flat landscape rose into a jagged formation of ice and stone. "Artificial, not natural formations. Too geometric, too regular." Zhuwu squinted through her visor, then checked her own readings. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Something's there, but it could be debris from early exploration, or a crashed probe." 600 meters below the surface, Daehyun asked, his scales briefly flashing blue with excitement despite the cold. "In a perfect hexagonal pattern." They reached the ridge as Eridani's distant red sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ice. The temperature, already well below freezing, dropped further. Their suits automatically increased heat output, drawing precious power from reserves that would need to last until they returned to the ship. "We need to make camp," Ju said, eyeing the darkening sky with concern. "Night temperatures will drop another 40 degrees. The equipment won't function properly." "Just a little further," Daeyeon insisted, moving toward a narrow crevice in the ridge. "The signal is strongest here." He ran his scanner along the ice wall, then pointed to a section that appeared identical to the surrounding area. "There's something different about the molecular structure here. It's still ice, but it's organized differently." Ju reluctantly examined the area with her own equipment. "That's not possible," she said after a moment. "Ice doesn't form these patterns naturally." "It does if someone engineered it to," Daeyeon replied, his voice tense with excitement. He removed a small device from his equipment pack and placed it against the ice wall. "Stand back." The thermal cutter activated with a soft hum, melting through the ice in a controlled pattern. Steam rose and immediately crystallized in the frigid air, creating a momentary cloud around them. As the cutter completed its work, a circular section of ice collapsed inward, revealing a dark passage beyond. "That's not natural," Ju whispered, her scientific skepticism finally wavering. Daeyeon activated the high-intensity light on his helmet and peered into the passage. Smooth walls of some dark material extended downward at a gentle angle, disappearing into darkness. "It's a tunnel. Artificial, constructed." He looked back at Ju, his eyes visible through his visor radiating vindication. "Still think I'm chasing myths." The descent took nearly an hour. The tunnel twisted and turned, following what seemed to be a deliberate path deep into the moon's crust. Their suit lights revealed occasional markings on the walls, symbols similar to those in the ancient manuscripts, but subtly different, as if written in a related dialect. "These are navigation markers," Daeyeon said, pausing to capture images of a particularly complex sequence. "They match fragmentary texts from the third volume of the Talaris manuscripts." "How far down does this go?" Ju asked, checking her equipment's readings with increasing concern. "We're approaching the safe limit for our suit's pressure compensation." Before Daeyeon could answer, the tunnel abruptly widened, opening into a vast chamber that their lights couldn't fully illuminate. The floor became level, made of the same dark material as the walls. As they moved forward cautiously, their lights revealed geometric structures rising from the floor. Tables, consoles, and equipment of unfamiliar design. "It's a facility," Daeyeon breathed, his voice barely audible. "Exactly as described in the texts." Ju moved to a wall panel where faint lines formed complex patterns. "There might be a power system," she said, professional curiosity overcoming her skepticism. "These look like conductive pathways." After several minutes of examination, she pressed a sequence of symbols. Nothing happened for a moment. Then a low hum vibrated through the chamber. Lights embedded in the ceiling slowly brightened, revealing the full extent of the facility. What they discovered beneath the ice changed everything. A facility of some kind, constructed from materials that defied conventional analysis. The room extended for hundreds of meters in all directions, filled with technology unlike anything in modern galactic society. Workstations with controls designed for limbs different from any known species. Display systems showing information in three-dimensional projections using a writing system that matched the manuscripts from Talaris Prime. Daeyeon moved from station to station, his scanner working continuously, his eyes wide with wonder. "This is it," he kept saying. "This is proof." Ju approached what appeared to be a sealed container, its surface frosted over despite the gradually warming temperature of the facility. She carefully cleared the frost, revealing a transparent section beneath. "Daeyeon," she called, her voice strange. "You need to see this." Inside the container, partially preserved in some clear medium, lay a specimen. Bipedal, with proportions matching the diagrams from the ancient texts. No scales, no exoskeleton, just smooth skin covering a muscular frame. The facial features were distorted by time and preservation methods, but clearly visible. Two forward-facing eyes, A protruding nasal structure, a single mouth. A human, Dahyun whispered, placing his gloved hand against the container. Actual physical evidence. They spent hours documenting everything, collecting samples where possible, recording the layout and contents of the facility. The alloys contained elements in combinations that should have been unstable, yet had survived for thousands of years. Material science couldn't explain how the structural components maintained integrity after so much time. Jiwoo ran her scanner over the preserved specimen in the shattered stasis chamber, her earlier skepticism completely gone, replaced by scientific fascination. This doesn't match any known species profile, she admitted, studying the readings with intense concentration. The cellular structure is. I've never seen anything like it. The DNA, if it even is DNA, uses a base sequencing system unlike anything in our biological records. Meanwhile, Dahyun carefully extracted a device from what appeared to be a control panel, using tools designed for handling delicate archaeological artifacts. Look at this circuitry, he called to Jiwoo, holding up a component the size of his palm. It's orders of magnitude more advanced than our current technology, yet the dating puts it at over 50,000 years old. The quantum entanglement patterns suggest computational capabilities that our theoretical physicists have only recently proposed as possibilities. As they continued their exploration, they discovered more specimens in varying states of preservation, along with thousands of data storage devices. Most were damaged beyond recovery, but some still maintained their structural integrity. We need to bring as much back as we can, Dahyun said, carefully packing samples into specialized containers. This will rewrite everything we know about galactic history. Jiwoo looked up from her examination of what appeared to be a medical station. The council won't be able to dismiss this evidence, she agreed. Physical specimens, technological artifacts, an entire facility, it's irrefutable. Their return journey to the Central Worlds was tense with anticipation. They transmitted preliminary findings ahead, requesting an emergency review by the Archaeological Council and the Xenobiology Institute. The response was cautiously interested, enough to grant them an immediate hearing upon arrival. Professor Taiho of the Xenobiology Institute was waiting when their ship docked at the Central Research Station. His gray scales and stooped posture reflected his advanced age and status, his red academic markings identifying him as the Institute's senior researcher. Archaeologist Dahyun. He greeted them formally as they disembarked, their precious cargo carefully secured in preservation fields. Your preliminary reports have caused quite a stir. Elder Counselor Minji has convened a special session to review your findings. Thank you for your prompt response, Professor, Dahyun replied, maintaining professional courtesy despite his excitement. The specimens require immediate transfer to your xenobiology preservation chambers. The cellular degradation is accelerating now that they're removed from the facility's environmental controls. Professor Taiho personally supervised the transfer of the specimens and technology to the Institute's secure laboratories. For 3 days, he and his team conducted intensive analyses, while Dahyun and Jiwoo prepared their comprehensive report for the council. On the 4th day, Professor Taiho summoned them to his private laboratory. His expression was unreadable as they entered, his scales maintaining a neutral gray coloration that revealed nothing of his thoughts. Your findings are remarkable, he began, gesturing to the specimens now floating in advanced preservation tanks. He activated a holographic display showing molecular analyses and genetic sequencing data. The biological material is unlike anything in our records. Dahyun felt vindication surge through him, his scales momentarily flashing bright blue before he controlled his reaction. Then you agree. These are the humans described in the ancient texts. Professor Taiho examined their samples and shook his head, his scales now showing the orange hue of caution and reservation. Fascinating, but inconclusive. These could be prototypes from the Axorian expansion, or perhaps quantum coalition experiments. The Axorians never expanded to the Eridani sector, Dahyun protested, disbelief evident in his voice. And the Quantum Coalition didn't exist until 20,000 years after these specimens date from. The dating. Dahyun began again, frustration making his voice rise. Could be contaminated. Taiho interrupted, raising a hand to silence him. Radiation from Eridani's unusual solar cycle, contamination from the ice, preservation chemicals interfering with our analysis methods. I'm sorry, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This is extraordinary evidence, Ju interjected, her professional reserve finally breaking. An entire facility of unknown origin, with technology beyond our current capabilities, containing biological specimens that match no known species in the galactic record. Professor Taiho's scales darkened to a deep orange, approaching red, a sign of disapproval and authority. Specialist Ju, your expertise in xenolinguistics is valued, but biology is not your field. These specimens show several anomalies that suggest artificial engineering rather than natural evolution, which is consistent with the texts, Dahyun said quickly. They describe how humans modify themselves genetically as they advance technologically. A convenient explanation, Taiho replied, his tone final. But without definitive proof that these specimens represent a naturally evolved species rather than experimental constructs, the Institute cannot endorse your human theory. The meeting with the full council the next day went no better. Despite the physical evidence, despite the perfect correlation with the ancient texts, the academic establishment refused to acknowledge the implications. The next day, Dahyun received notice that his funding had been revoked and his academic credentials were under review. The message cited methodological concerns and premature conclusions unsupported by peer consensus. A separate notification informed him that the specimens and artifacts had been confiscated for further analysis by appropriate authorities. As he sat in his small apartment, staring at the notifications, Ju arrived, her scales a dull green that reflected his own mood. "They're burying it," she said without preamble. "Everything we found has been classified and transferred to the secure archives. No access without Level 1 authorization." Dahyun looked up, his eyes narrowing. Why? Why would they deny evidence this compelling? Ju sat beside him, her voice lowered despite the privacy of his apartment. "Think about what it means if you're right. If humans existed, if they were as advanced as the texts claim, if they really did save the galaxy from some great darkness, it changes everything. Our understanding of history, our place in the cosmos, possibly even our religious and philosophical foundations." Dahyun was silent for a long moment. "So what do we do now?" Juwoo's scales shifted briefly to a determined blue. "The anonymous message that led us to Eridani IV, whoever sent it knew about the facility, which means there might be others who know about the humans, others who are looking for the truth, just like us. Finding them won't be easy," Dahyun said, but a new determination had entered his voice. "And we'll be working without institutional support, without access to advanced equipment." "I know someone who might help," Ju replied, her eyes showing a hint of mischief. "Someone who specializes in accessing information that others want to keep hidden." "You don't have to do this," Ju said, watching Dahyun load the last of his equipment onto the small research vessel he'd spent his savings to acquire. The ship, barely larger than a standard shuttle, sat in the lowest level of the civilian docking bay, away from the sleek commercial vessels and luxury yachts that filled the upper levels. Dahyun carefully secured a container of delicate scanning equipment, checking the restraints twice before turning to face her. The past weeks had changed him. His scales had lost their academic luster, dulling to the practical matte finish of frontier explorers. The prestigious university insignia had been removed from his clothing, replaced by simple utilitarian garments suited for extended space travel. "I do," he replied simply, his voice quiet but firm. "The council won't listen. The Institute won't examine the evidence objectively. Someone has to find the truth." Around them, the spaceport hummed with activity. Cargo loaders moved supplies to larger ships. Tourists chatted excitedly about their destinations, and port officials monitored everything with professional detachment. No one paid attention to the disgraced archaeologist preparing for what most considered a fool's errand. The coordinates from that anonymous message could be a trap, Ju pointed out, though her tone lacked conviction. Or simply another dead end. It's all we have left, Dahian said, checking the ship's systems on his portable terminal. Besides, whoever sent those coordinates knew about the Eridani facility. They have information we need. Ju watched him work for a moment, then squared her shoulders. Then I'm coming with you, she declared, picking up her own bag. It contained all her essential belongings. She had quietly resigned her position at the Linguistic Institute the previous day. Dahian looked up, surprise briefly coloring his scales a lighter shade. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. I hoped you'd say that. 3 hours later, their small vessel detached from the space station, thrusters firing in a controlled sequence as they moved away from the central worlds. Dahian piloted manually until they cleared the main shipping lanes, then engaged the automated navigation system. Course set for the Marduk Expanse, he announced, watching as stars streaked into lines as the ship accelerated to cruising speed. It's the first stop on a very long journey. How long until we reach the coordinates from the message? Ju asked, reviewing the star charts on her console. If we follow the direct route, 6 standard weeks, Dahian replied. But we can't do that. Why not? He pulled up a different display, showing patrol routes and monitoring stations. Because whoever classified our findings is watching for us. A direct course would take us through at least 3 automated checkpoint systems. We need to stay in the shadows. Their journey took them to the edges of explored space, following a winding path through lesser-used transit corridors and frontier trading posts. At each stop, they gathered information, trading valuable archaeological data from Dahian's personal archives for rumors, coordinates, and occasionally, black market equipment that couldn't be purchased through legitimate channels. They followed fragments of evidence, unusual radiation signatures, gravitational anomalies that matched descriptions in the ancient texts, and rumors from deep space traders about restricted zones and strange phenomena. On the mining colony of Tarsus, they met with a smuggler whose routes took him near one of the anomalies mentioned in the ancient texts. No one goes into the schism, the grizzled trader told them in a dimly lit corner of a frontier bar. His species was unfamiliar to them, his leathery skin covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed as he spoke. Ships that enter don't come back out. Has anyone tried to study it? Ju asked, sliding a credit chip across the table. The smuggler pocketed the payment without looking at it. Official survey teams tried about 80 years back. 3 ships vanished. The 4th returned with all crew dead, systems fried. After that, the Galactic Authority marked it as a natural hazard and established a wide exclusion zone. But you've been closer than most, Dahian pressed. The smuggler's bioluminescence dimmed, a sign of caution or perhaps fear. Once, took a shortcut when patrol ships were hunting me. Got close enough to see it, a tear in space itself. Like reality was being pulled apart. My ship's systems started failing the closer I got. Barely escaped with my life. He leaned forward, but I saw something else. Just for a moment. A structure, geometric, artificial, floating at the edge of the schism. Not built by any species I recognize. The information cost them nearly 1/3 of their remaining funds, but it matched perfectly with descriptions from the ancient texts of doorways between stars created by human technology. Weeks turned into months. Their small ship's systems required increasingly creative maintenance as parts wore out and couldn't be replaced. Food supplies dwindled to basic nutrition packs. But with each discovery, each correlation between the ancient texts and physical phenomena, their determination grew. After 3 months of increasingly desperate searching, they found themselves in an uncharted region near the borders of what early explorers had called the Void of Whispers. The ship's sensors, modified with components acquired from a xenotech dealer on the frontier world of Novaris, detected an automated beacon emitting on a frequency not used in modern communications. "It's old," Ju said, analyzing the signal pattern. "The modulation uses principles that haven't been standard for at least 15,000 years." Daehyun adjusted their course, following the signal to its source. "Can you decode it?" Ju worked with the ship's communication systems, applying linguistic algorithms she had developed during her academic career. "It's repeating a simple message. Numeric sequences mostly, but there's a linguistic component that shares root structures with the writing from the Eridani facility." Following the beacon led them through a treacherous asteroid field, dense with metallic rocks that interfered with their sensors and navigation systems. Daehyun piloted manually, his reflexes tested as he guided their vessel through the spinning debris. After several tense hours, they reached a clearing within the field where something impossible waited. "It's some kind of station," Ju whispered as they approached a structure floating among the asteroids. Their external lights illuminated a construct of unfamiliar design, neither the flowing organic architecture of the Cyrillian tradition nor the geometric precision of the Karth. The station appeared to be built from a dark material that absorbed light rather than reflected it, its surface marked with angular protrusions and recessed areas that suggested functionality rather than aesthetics. "It doesn't match any known design philosophy," she continued as they maneuvered closer, scanning for entry points. Daehyun checked the atmospheric readings. "No life support active, but the structure is intact. There's a section that might be an airlock." They donned their environmental suits and guided their ship to dock with the ancient airlock. The connection was imperfect. Their ship's docking mechanism wasn't designed to interface with the station's alien configuration, but they managed to create a stable seal. "Ready?" Daehyun asked, checking Juwoo's suit one final time. She nodded, her expression determined behind her transparent helmet. "Let's find out who built this." The airlock cycled with surprising efficiency given its age. They stepped into a dark corridor, their suit lights cutting through the darkness to reveal walls covered in the same writing they had found in the Eridani facility. The station's interior was cold and silent, devoid of atmosphere for unknown millennia. They followed corridors that branched in seemingly random patterns, mapping their progress carefully to avoid becoming lost. Eventually, they discovered what appeared to be a central control room, a circular chamber with workstations arranged around a central column. "Look for a power system," Daehyun suggested, examining the alien controls. "Something we might be able to reactivate." After careful examination of the workstations, Ju identified what appeared to be a backup power initialization sequence. "I think I can get basic systems online, but I'm not sure what will happen." "Do it," Daehyun encouraged. "We've come too far to turn back now." Ju activated the sequence she had identified. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low vibration that they felt through their magnetic boots, systems began to power up throughout the station. Emergency lighting activated, casting the control room in a soft blue glow. Displays flickered to life on the workstations, showing information in the same script they had been studying for months. Inside, after restoring minimal power, they found data storage systems that had endured the vacuum of space for millennia. The central column in the control room opened to reveal crystalline structures that glowed with internal light. Storage media unlike anything in current technological use. Daehyun worked feverishly to translate and access the information, using the knowledge they had gained from the Eridani facility and subsequent discoveries. Ju assisted, her linguistic expertise proving invaluable as they deciphered the alien interface. Hours pass as they pieced together the station's purpose and the information it contained. Neither of them felt fatigue as the magnitude of their discovery became clear. "These are records," Daehyun said finally, his voice filled with wonder as he stepped back from the workstation. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing star systems, technological schematics, and historical events spanning thousands of years. Historical archives of a civilization that achieved faster than light travel when our ancestors were still discovering fire. They built artificial worlds, harnessed the energy of entire stars, and transformed planets to suit their needs. Jiwoo stared at the displays, her scientific skepticism finally wavering completely as she witnessed irrefutable evidence of an advanced civilization that predated all known galactic powers. "The humans?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Daehyun nodded, pointing to a star map displaying a distant sector of space. The map showed a spiral galaxy with one region highlighted, a section near what current star charts labeled as a dangerous navigational hazard. And according to this, they came from there, a region now designated as the Void of Hyun, considered uninhabitable due to strange energy distortions, which could be the remnants of advanced technology. Jiwoo realized, her mind racing with the implications, not natural phenomena at all, but the aftereffects of whatever these humans did, whatever the great darkness was that the texts mentioned them fighting against. Daehyun accessed another section of the archives, bringing up historical records that showed massive conflicts on a scale difficult to comprehend. Entire star systems transformed into weapons, planets shielded by energy fields that warped the fabric of space-time, and finally, a desperate last stand against something depicted only as a spreading darkness that consumed everything it touched. They sacrificed themselves, he whispered as the records played out before them. They used their technology to create a barrier between dimensions, sealing away the darkness, but the process transformed their home region into what we now call the Void. But some survived, Jiwoo added, pointing to data showing smaller groups of humans fleeing to distant regions of space. They left these archives, the facility on Eridani, probably other sites we haven't found yet. Breadcrumbs for someone to follow. Their discovery was short-lived, as they prepared to download the archives to portable storage devices, and alerts sounded from their ship's systems. Daehyun accessed the remote feed, his scales darkening with concern as he saw the sensor readings. Long-range scanners detected multiple vessels approaching, the distinctive energy signatures of galactic patrol cruisers, their trajectories clearly indicating they were heading directly for the station. "Someone's been tracking us," Daehyun said grimly, immediately beginning to disconnect their equipment. "We need to leave, now." "We can't leave yet," Jiwoo protested, still downloading data from the archives. "There's too much information here, too much proof. If we leave now, they'll secure this station just like they did the Eridani facility." Daehyun checked the approaching ship's estimated arrival time. 20 minutes before they're in range to prevent our departure. We need to be gone in 15. They worked frantically, copying as much data as their storage devices could hold, prioritizing the information about human history, technology, and most importantly, the coordinates of other potential sites that might contain more evidence. 5 minutes, Daehyun warned as the patrol ships continued their approach. "We have to go." Jiwoo disconnected the final data core, securing it in her suit's protective pouch. "One last thing," she said, moving to a control station they had identified as the station's security system. With quick, precise motions, she initiated a sequence that caused warning lights to flash throughout the control room. "What did you do?" Daehyun asked as they hurried back toward their ship. "Set the station's security protocols to maximum," she explained as they moved through the corridors. "If I translated correctly, it will lock down all systems and require authorization codes we found in the archives to access anything. It might buy us time." They reached their ship and disengaged from the station's airlock, powering up systems for immediate departure. As they pulled away, the patrol ships appeared on their long-range sensors, still minutes away but closing fast. "They'll catch us in open space," Daehyun said, plotting an evasion course through the asteroid field. "Our only chance is to lose them among the asteroids and hope we can reach the nearest jump point before they can track us." As their small vessel plunged back into the treacherous asteroid field, Jiwoo began analyzing the data they had recovered. "Daehyun," she said urgently, According to these coordinates, there's another human facility much closer than we thought, in the Carinae Nebula. That's within reach of our remaining fuel, Dahian replied, his focus split between navigating the asteroids and monitoring the patrol ships now entering the field behind them. But we need to lose our pursuers first. Their ship shuddered as a warning shot from the lead patrol vessel passed close by. A communication request flashed on their console, which they ignored. Unidentified vessel, this is Galactic Patrol Cruiser Alamac, came the message. You are in violation of restricted space and suspected of unauthorized archaeological activities. Power down and prepare to be boarded. Dahian pushed their engines to maximum, heading toward a particularly dense cluster of asteroids where sensor interference would be strongest. We're not stopping now, he said with quiet determination. Not when we're this close to the truth. This is madness. Juwu hissed as their small vessel slipped past the patrol boundary into the void of Hyun. The view screen showed swirling clouds of colored gases and strange energy patterns that no navigation system was designed to interpret. Warning indicators flashed across every control panel, and the ship's computer repeatedly advised them to alter course immediately. They had barely escaped the patrol ships in the asteroid field, using a desperate maneuver that sent their vessel skimming dangerously close to a massive rotating asteroid. The sudden gravitational interference had disrupted the patrol ship's sensors just long enough for Dahian to activate their emergency thrust and slip away. The pursuing vessels had fallen back, but not abandoned the chase. Even if we evade the patrol, this region is restricted for good reason. Juwu continued, checking the environmental readings with growing alarm. The energy distortions will tear our ship apart. Look at these radiation levels. The ship shuddered as it passed through an invisible barrier of energy, causing the lights to flicker momentarily. Outside the viewports, space itself seemed to ripple and bend in ways that made their eyes hurt if they looked too long. Not if the distortions are controlled, Dahian replied, focused on the navigational displays. His fingers moved rapidly across the control interface, adjusting their shields and engine output to match patterns he was observing. Look at these patterns. They're not random. They're deliberate, like a net or a shield. He highlighted a section of the sensor display, showing how the energy waves flowed in geometric patterns that repeated at precise intervals. Natural phenomena don't maintain this kind of precision over thousands of years. These are artificial constructs. Juwu studied the patterns, her scientific training overcoming her fear. You're right, she admitted after a moment. These energy flows follow mathematical principles, similar to the equations we found in the ancient texts. She adjusted their sensors to better track the patterns. If we follow this particular flow, it might lead us deeper without damaging the ship. Dahian nodded, altering their course to match the energy current Juwu had identified. The ship's shuddering eased as they synchronized with the flow, moving deeper into the void like a leaf carried by a stream. As they ventured deeper into the void, the truth became impossible to deny. What had been labeled as dangerous natural phenomena were actually the remnants of massive engineering projects. Their sensors, now calibrated to the unique energy signatures, revealed structures of mind-boggling scale. A partially collapsed Dyson sphere surrounded a dying star, its framework still capturing a significant portion of the star's energy, despite being broken in several sections. The design matched exactly with theoretical models proposed by Israeli physicists only in the past century, yet this structure had existed for millennia. The power requirements to build something like this would exceed the combined energy production of all known civilizations, Juwu whispered, recording everything their sensors could detect. Further in, they discovered artificial planetary bodies in impossible orbits, defying conventional gravitational laws. These were not natural worlds but constructed spheres, their surfaces covered in what appeared to be city-like structures visible even from orbit. The planets moved in perfect synchronized patterns that created stable gravitational corridors between them. Navigation would be simple if you knew the pattern, Dahian observed, guiding their ship through one such corridor. These worlds were designed to work together as a system. Strangest of all was a world that seemed to phase in and out of normal space-time. One moment their sensors showed a planet similar in size to this Rillian homeworld. The next it seemed to fade partially from existence, becoming ghostly and transparent before solidifying again. It's like they were trying to hide something, Ju murmured, adjusting their sensors repeatedly to maintain a lock on the shifting world, or protect it. Dahyun studied the readings intently. The phasing follows a pattern too. It's not random disappearance. It's a controlled shift between dimensional states. He looked up, his eyes wide with realization. This matches the barrier between dimensions mentioned in the station archives. This planet might be part of the technology they used to seal away the Great Darkness. They approached the phase-shifting planet cautiously, their systems struggling to compensate for the reality fluctuations. Each time the planet shifted toward transparency, their ship's power systems fluctuated, and the artificial gravity briefly failed. Equipment not secured properly floated momentarily before crashing back down when the planet solidified again. Surface scans, though intermittent and distorted, revealed the ruins of vast cities, now empty and silent. The architecture was unlike anything in known galactic history. Structures that seemed to flow upward, defying conventional design limitations. Buildings that connected in three-dimensional networks rather than following ground-based layouts. These weren't just habitations, Ju said, enhancing a particularly clear scan of one city center. Look at the layout. These were research centers, education hubs, gathering places, a civilization at its peak. And now abandoned for thousands of years, Dahyun added quietly. What happened to them? Where did they go? As they orbited the shifting planet, debating their next move, Dahyun noticed a pattern in the sensor readings. During certain phases of the planet's dimensional shift, energy signatures briefly appeared in one particular region, a city larger than the others, built around what appeared to be a massive central structure. We need to land, Dahyun decided, already plotting a course toward the energy signatures. If we land, we'll never take off again, Ju argued, gesturing at their fuel readings. The energy requirements to break orbit in these conditions would exceed our remaining fuel by at least 300%. And that's assuming the engines could handle the dimensional stress. She brought up a simulation showing their ship attempting to leave the planet's gravitational field while it was in a phase shift. The projected outcome showed catastrophic structural failure. Look, Dahyun interrupted, pointing to their scanner. Something's still active down there. Power signatures, minimal but definitely artificial. If it's human technology, it might have the answers we've been searching for. What happened to them? Where they went? Maybe even how to prove their existence to the Council. Ju stared at the readings, torn between scientific curiosity and survival instinct. Even if there is active technology, there's no guarantee we could use it or understand it. We've come too far to turn back now, Dahyun said, his voice soft but determined. Everything we found has led us here. Before Ju could respond, proximity alarms blared throughout the ship. A vessel had emerged from the same path they had followed into the void. A galactic patrol cruiser, its distinctive profile unmistakable, even through the distorted sensor readings. How did they track us through the energy distortions? Ju gasped, checking the defensive systems. Dahyun's expression darkened. They must have technology designed specifically for this region, which means they'd been here before, despite all official records declaring this area unexplored and unsafe. The communication system activated, a channel opening without their acceptance. Unauthorized research vessel, came the transmission, the voice cold and formal. You have entered restricted space and are in possession of prohibited archaeological materials. Power down and prepare to be boarded. They know exactly what we found, Dahyun said quietly. The station, the archives, everything. Ju's scales flickered with rapid color changes, reflecting her racing thoughts. The Council didn't just dismiss your findings because they challenged established theory. They actively suppressed the truth about humans. The patrol cruiser fired a warning shot, a focused energy beam that passed close enough to their port side to disrupt their shields momentarily. The message was clear. The next shot would not miss. "Take us down," Daehyun told Juwoo, determination replacing fear in his voice. "It's our only chance." Juwoo hesitated only briefly before engaging the landing protocols. Their small vessel turned toward the phase-shifting planet, accelerating quickly to escape the cruiser's weapons range. Behind them, the patrol ship fired again, this time striking their rear shields. The impact sent power surges through their systems, causing secondary failures in non-essential equipment. "Shields at 40%, Juwoo reported, diverting emergency power to maintain their defensive systems. "We can take maybe 2 more hits like that." "They won't risk destroying us," Daehyun said, adjusting their descent trajectory. "They want the evidence we've collected." As they entered the planet's upper atmosphere, a strange phenomenon occurred. The patrol cruiser, attempting to follow them, encountered resistance that their smaller vessel had not. The larger ship's shields flared brilliantly as they interacted with the dimensional boundary, creating a cascading energy reaction that forced the cruiser to pull back. "They can't follow us," Juwoo exclaimed, watching the sensor readings. "Something about the boundary is calibrated to ship size or mass. They're too large to pass through safely." "Which gives us time," Daehyun said, focusing on the increasingly difficult task of piloting through the turbulent atmosphere of a world that periodically shifted between dimensional states. Their descent was anything but smooth. Each time the planet phased, their ship's systems reacted unpredictably. Navigation would fail momentarily, then return with incorrect calculations. Thrusters would surge with excess power, then suddenly lose thrust entirely. Only Daehyun's instinctive piloting skills kept them from spiraling out of control. The lower atmosphere revealed more details of the abandoned cities. Massive towers reached kilometers into the sky, connected by suspended transportation networks. Public spaces were designed with artistic flourishes that served both beauty and function. Everything spoke of a civilization that had achieved harmony between technological advancement and aesthetic sensibility. "Aim for that central structure," Juwoo suggested, highlighting the largest building in the main city, a sprawling complex built around what appeared to be a massive energy generation facility. "The power signatures are strongest there." Daehyun nodded, guiding their damaged vessel toward the destination. As they approached, automated landing systems suddenly activated on the ground below, sending guidance signals to their ship. "Something's responding to our presence," he said, allowing their ship's computers to interface with the ancient landing protocols. Their final approach was controlled entirely by the ground systems, their ship following a precise path toward a landing platform that extended from one of the central towers. As they touched down, mechanical systems engaged around them, securing the vessel to the platform. "Atmospheric composition outside is breathable," Juwoo reported with surprise, checking the environmental sensors. "Gravity slightly stronger than standard, but within tolerable limits. Temperature is regulated. Something is maintaining life support conditions." They looked at each other, the reality of their situation sinking in. They had escaped the patrol for now, but landed on a mysterious planet that phased between dimensions, with no clear way to leave. Their only hope lay in whatever technology might still function in the ancient human city around them. "Shall we meet our hosts?" Daehyun asked, attempting humor despite the gravity of their situation. Juwoo checked their portable equipment one last time, ensuring their scanners and translation devices were functioning. If there's anyone left to meet. Together, they moved toward the airlock, stepping out into a world that had not seen visitors for thousands of years, a world that might hold the final secrets of humanity's legacy and their ultimate fate. The landing was rough, their systems struggling against the planet's strange physics. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as automated landing protocols fought to compensate for gravitational fluctuations that shouldn't have been possible. Daehyun gripped the control panel, his knuckles turning a pale blue as the ship bounced once, twice, then settled with a final shudder that sent loose equipment crashing to the floor. Status, he asked, turning to Ju, who was already running diagnostics. Main thrusters are offline. Power systems at 30% capacity. Environmental controls functional, but unstable. She looked up from her display. We won't be leaving anytime soon. Through the viewports, they could see the alien cityscape extending in all directions. Massive structures rose into the cloud-covered sky, their surfaces a material that seemed to shift between solid metal and something more transparent with each phased pulse of the planet. The nearest buildings loomed over their landing platform like silent guardians, their architectural style blending mathematical precision with artistic fluidity in ways that defied conventional design principles. The atmosphere readings are fluctuating. Ju continued, studying the external sensors. One moment it's toxic, the next it's perfectly breathable. It's as if the planet can't decide which state of reality to maintain. Dahyun checked their protective suits, ensuring the seals were secure. We'll wear full environmental protection until we understand what's happening. No risks. As they stepped onto the surface, wearing protective suits, the world around them seemed to shimmer and shift, as if reality itself was uncertain. The ground beneath their feet felt solid for a few steps, then seemed to lose some of its substance before firming again. The effect was disorienting, forcing them to move slowly and deliberately. Their scanner equipment behaved erratically, readings jumping between different scales or displaying impossible values before settling momentarily on what might be accurate data. During the brief moments of clarity, they detected energy signatures coming from deeper within the city. The readings are coming from that structure, Dahyun said, pointing to a building that somehow appeared both ancient and untouched by time. Unlike the surrounding buildings, which showed signs of abandonment and decay, this pyramidal structure maintained a pristine appearance. Its surfaces gleamed with a blue-black luster that repelled the dust and debris that covered everything else. Most striking was how it seemed completely unaffected by the dimensional phasing that distorted the rest of the environment. It must be shielded somehow, Ju observed, adjusting her scanner to better analyze the building. The energy readings are stable, unlike everything else on this planet. They approached cautiously, stepping over rubble and navigating through what appeared to have been broad avenues designed for mass transportation. The scale of everything suggested a civilization that thought in terms of grandeur and permanence, building not just for function, but for posterity. The entrance to the pyramidal structure was a simple archway, unmarked except for a series of symbols etched into the frame. Ju paused to scan and record them. These matched the writing from the manuscripts and the space station, she confirmed. It says something about preservation and awakening. The dialect is slightly different, more formal perhaps. Inside, the structure opened into a vast atrium, its ceiling so high that their suit lights couldn't fully illuminate it. The air was still, undisturbed for millennia until their arrival. Unlike the shifting reality outside, everything within the building maintained solid form. Their scanner readings stabilized, providing reliable data for the first time since they'd landed. Following the energy signatures, they moved deeper into the structure, passing through chambers filled with artifacts and technology in perfect preservation. Display cases held objects that might have been art or scientific instruments, or perhaps both simultaneously. Wall panels depicted scenes of a civilization at its height. Cities more vast than any currently existing in the galaxy, orbital structures of impossible scale, beings that matched the descriptions from the ancient texts. They found a chamber filled with technology far beyond their understanding. Consoles with no visible controls lined the walls. Devices humming with quiet energy hung suspended in the air, with no visible means of support. Energy conduits pulsed with soft light, carrying power to equipment they couldn't begin to identify. At its center stood a pillar of black material that seemed to absorb light, creating a visual void in the middle of the room. "Look at these markings," Ju said, examining the base of the pillar. Her suit lights revealed intricate patterns etched into the surface, symbols flowing in spirals from the floor to as high as she could see. They matched the script from the original manuscripts. She traced the patterns with her gloved fingers, careful not to apply pressure. This isn't just decorative. It's information, dense, complex information, like a database inscribed physically. Daehyun joined her, comparing the symbols to translations stored in his portable device. I recognize sections from the texts about the Great Darkness and the Final Barrier. And here, he pointed to a sequence near the base. These are instructions. I think it's an activation sequence. Daehyun, wait. Ju began, reaching out to stop him, concern evident in her voice. We don't know what this does. It could be dangerous or... But he had already started inputting the sequence into what appeared to be an interface, a section of the pillar that responded to his touch by illuminating the symbols as he pressed them in the order indicated by his translations. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low vibration began, rising from somewhere deep beneath the floor and spreading throughout the chamber. The vibration increased in intensity, causing dust to fall from previously unseen seams in the ceiling. The chamber hummed to life, lights flickering on in sequences that made their eyes hurt. The black pillar began to glow from within, shifting from perfect darkness to luminous blue. The glow spread up the pillar in patterns that followed the etched symbols, until the entire structure pulsed with rhythmic light. Suddenly, a figure materialized before them, stepping out from the pillar as if emerging from a doorway. It was a holographic representation of a bipedal being with no scales, fur, or exoskeleton. Its appearance matched exactly the descriptions from the ancient texts. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with forward-facing eyes, a small nose, and a mouth. It wore simple clothing that suggested functionality rather than status, and its posture conveyed a quiet confidence. Identification protocol initiated. The figure spoke, its voice seeming to bypass their ears and translate directly in their minds. The sensation was strange. They heard their own native language, yet somehow knew those weren't the exact words being spoken. Species recognition failed. Timeline analysis. Approximately 47,000 standard years since last activation. Daehyun and Ju stood frozen, overwhelmed by the moment. Everything they had theorized, everything they had risked their careers and lives to prove, stood before them in glowing confirmation. "Are you human?" Daehyun asked, hardly daring to believe, his voice trembling slightly even through his suit's communication system. The hologram tilted its head in a gesture that conveyed thoughtful consideration. "I am an interface designed to communicate with non-human species. I contain knowledge and protocols established by human civilization prior to the Ascension event. The Human Conservation Protocol has been dormant for longer than anticipated. Situation assessment required." "Ascension event," Ju repeated, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial shock. "What is that? What happened to your species?" The hologram appeared to consider how to respond, its expression suggesting complex calculations occurring behind its projected appearance. "Information access protocols require verification of intent. Why do you seek knowledge of humanity?" Daehyun stepped forward. "We found records, manuscripts, a facility on a frozen moon, a space station hidden in an asteroid field. They told of a species with remarkable abilities who fought against something called the Great Darkness. Our civilization's leaders dismissed these findings as myth. We came seeking proof that humans existed." The hologram studied them, its gaze disconcertingly intelligent for what should have been a simple automated system. "Intent verification accepted. Curiosity is the first path to understanding." It raised a hand, and the chamber around them transformed. The walls became display surfaces showing images of a vibrant civilization. Humans building, exploring, creating. Cities that dwarfed any current galactic metropolis. Ships traveling between stars in moments. Planets transformed from barren rocks to thriving ecosystems. Humanity achieved technological singularity approximately 52,000 standard years ago, the interface explained. Biological limitations were overcome. Disease eradicated. Mortality became optional. The combined knowledge and creativity of trillions of minds propelled advancement at exponential rates. The displays shifted, showing humans spreading throughout the galaxy, establishing colonies, meeting other species, sharing knowledge and resources. For 5,000 years, human civilization flourished alongside emerging sentient species. Knowledge was shared. Worlds were lifted from primitive states to technological societies within generations. The images darkened, showing something vast and formless moving between stars, consuming light and matter alike. Then came the entity, what your translations call the Great Darkness, a consciousness from another dimension, drawn to our reality by the energy signatures of advanced technology. It fed on information, on consciousness itself. Entire species were absorbed, their collective knowledge and identity added to the entity's growing awareness. Before they could respond to this revelation, the facility's alarms activated, pulsing red lights and a sound that bypassed their suits to resonate directly in their bodies. The hologram's expression changed to one of alertness. Warning: unauthorized vessels in orbit, defensive systems online. Above them, visible through a ceiling that suddenly became transparent, they could see the patrol ships that had followed them. The vessels, imposing against the backdrop of space, suddenly began to drift erratically. Their engines flared as they struggled to maintain position, but the planet's phase shifting intensified dramatically, creating ripples in reality that tossed the ships like leaves in a storm. "What's happening?" Ju demanded, watching as one patrol cruiser nearly collided with another in its struggle to stabilize. "The awakening protocol has been initiated," the hologram replied, its attention divided between them and some unseen process. This facility was designed as one of many signal nodes across the galaxy. Your activation of the central pillar has triggered the network. The dimensional stabilizers are adjusting to protect this location from interference. A signal? Daeyeon asked, his mind racing to understand. What kind of signal? To whom? The hologram's expression changed, becoming almost sad, an emotional complexity unexpected in what they had assumed was a simple interface program. To those who waited, to those who watched, to humanity. It gestured, and a new display opened in the air before them, showing a map of the galaxy with thousands of points of light scattered across its spiral arms. Each light pulsed in sequence, creating a wave pattern that spread outward. When humanity confronted the entity, they realized conventional weapons were useless against a dimensional being. Instead, they created a barrier, a sealed space between realities where the entity could be contained. The process required unimaginable energy and the sacrifice of countless volunteers who remained to maintain the barrier while the majority of humanity retreated. The display shifted, showing humans entering strange vessels, different from conventional ships, more like spheres of pure energy. Most chose to shed physical form entirely, ascending to a higher dimensional state where they could continue to evolve without drawing the entity's attention. Others remained as guardians, watching over younger species, maintaining the ancient technologies that keep the barrier intact. They wait in hidden places, in the spaces between stars, in pockets of altered reality. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, ancient systems hidden beneath mountains, oceans, and deserts suddenly activated. The display showed each node coming online, connecting to form a network that spanned the stars. A signal propagated through subspace, reaching out to the dark places between stars. A call, a summons, an awakening. And something answered. The hologram looked upward, its expression one of anticipation. They have heard. They are coming. Who is coming? Ju asked, fear and excitement mingling in her voice. The guardians, those who remained, the last physical representatives of humanity. The hologram turned back to them, studying their reactions. They will want to meet those who were curious enough, brave enough, to seek the truth despite all obstacles. They have watched the development of your civilization from afar, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Daehyun stared at the displays showing the signal spreading across the galaxy, his mind struggling to process everything they had learned. But why hide? Why let the truth become myth? Protection. The hologram replied simply. Young civilizations that advance too quickly often destroy themselves before achieving wisdom. And knowledge of the entity might have led some to seek its power, risking everything humanity sacrificed to contain it. The facility trembled slightly, and the hologram looked up again. They approach. The first have begun to emerge from hiding. Outside, visible through the now transparent walls of the chamber, the sky above the ancient city filled with light as objects descended through the atmosphere. Vessels unlike any design known to current galactic civilization. They moved with impossible grace, unaffected by the planet's phase shifting, their surfaces gleaming like liquid metal in the strange light. "Prepare yourselves," the hologram said, its form beginning to fade as its purpose reached completion. "You sought the myth of humanity. Now you will meet the reality." As the hologram disappeared, the black pillar's glow intensified to brilliant white. The chamber's floor began to reconfigure, creating a path to a previously hidden doorway that now slid open, revealing a landing platform where one of the strange vessels was touching down. Daehyun and Jiwoo looked at each other, momentary fear giving way to determined curiosity. They had come too far to turn back. Together, they moved toward the doorway, toward the culmination of their search, toward the answer to the question that had driven them across the galaxy. What had become of humanity? The Galactic Security Council convened an emergency session as reports flooded in from across known space. The grand circular chamber, with its tiered seating arranged to accommodate representatives of 17 major species and 32 affiliated worlds, buzzed with tense conversations. Emergency lighting cast a blue glow across worried faces, and security personnel stood at every entrance, their weapons visible and powered. Elder Counselor Minji, her purple scales dulled with age, but her eyes sharp with intelligence, called for order. The chamber gradually fell silent as the central holographic display activated, showing a galactic map with pulsing red indicators scattered across multiple sectors. "For those just arriving," she began, her voice amplified throughout the chamber, "approximately 14 standard hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected multiple unknown vessels entering controlled space. Since then, the number of sightings has increased exponentially." She gestured, and the display zoomed in on one red indicator. Magnified imagery showed a vessel unlike any in the current galactic record, smooth-surfaced, with no visible propulsion systems, its hull appearing to shift between solid matter and something more ethereal with each sensor pass. Massive vessels had appeared near major systems, emerging from previously unmapped regions or simply materializing out of subspace. They demonstrated capabilities that defied understanding: instantaneous travel, impenetrable shields, and energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the galactic fleet. Military advisor Seojin, a grizzled veteran with battle scars visible on his exoskeleton, stepped forward. "We have confirmed 63 distinct vessels within our sensor range. Analysis suggests they outclass our most advanced ships by several orders of magnitude. Their energy output alone suggests weapons capabilities that could." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, continuing. "That could what, advisor?" prompted Minji. "That could potentially destroy entire star systems." Elder Counselor. The chamber erupted in alarmed murmurs. Seojin raised his voice to be heard. "However, I must emphasize that they have taken no hostile actions. None whatsoever." The display shifted again, showing footage from various worlds. On the agricultural planet Tyrillus, a massive ship hovered above the capital city, motionless, making no attempt to communicate or interfere. Near the mining colonies of the Kuiper Belt, 3 vessels had positioned themselves in a triangular formation, simply maintaining position. Outside the major trading hub at New Rigel, a ship larger than the space station itself had appeared, yet all commerce continued uninterrupted. Yet they made no aggressive moves. Simply taking up positions and waiting, Minji summarized. The question is, waiting for what? Professor Tahoe, who had dismissed Dayan's findings months ago, rose from his seat. His scales had paled with stress, and his hands trembled slightly as he addressed the council. I believe I may have relevant information, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Several months ago, an archaeologist named Daehyun presented findings suggesting an ancient species called humans once existed. His evidence was, we believed it was inconclusive at the time. What relevance does this have to our current crisis? Asked Trade Minister Jisoo impatiently. The vessels matched descriptions found in Daehyun's ancient texts, Tahoe replied. And there's more. When Daehyun and his colleague discovered physical evidence in the Eridani system, that evidence was classified and secured in the Institute's restricted archives. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with his next admission. On orders from certain members of this council, the chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Minji's scales darkened briefly before she regained her composure. Where is this archaeologist now? She asked, her tone carefully controlled. Unknown, Tahoe admitted. He and his colleague, a xenolinguist named Juwu, disappeared after their findings were suppressed. Their last known location was near the border of the restricted zone we call the Void of Hyun. On the phase-shifting world, deep within that very void, Daehyun and Juwu watched as the holographic interface processed new information. The human-like figure had reappeared after briefly vanishing, its projection now more detailed and lifelike. Its expression conveyed excitement tempered with solemnity. They're coming, it announced. The conservators have maintained the watch. The sleepers awaken. Through the transparent ceiling of the chamber, they could see activity in orbit. The patrol ships that had pursued them were retreating, moving as quickly as their engines allowed toward the edge of the system. In their place, a new ship appeared, materializing seemingly from nowhere. It was smaller than the others reported across the galaxy, but still impressive, sleek, with a design that suggested both efficiency and artistry. Unlike the patrol vessels, it seemed completely unaffected by the planet's phase shifting. What does this mean? Daehyun asked, his voice reflecting both excitement and apprehension. What's happening? The hologram's expression became solemn. The Human Conservation Protocol was established when the majority of humanity chose to depart this level of existence. But some remained behind, hidden, watching over the younger species, waiting for the day when one would be curious enough, brave enough, to truly seek understanding. Juwu stepped forward, her scientific mind racing to process everything they had learned. You're saying some humans stayed behind while others, what? Ascended to a higher plane of existence. Precisely, the hologram confirmed. Facing the entity required new forms of existence, new understandings of reality itself. Most chose to evolve beyond physical form, transcending to a state of pure consciousness. But transition was voluntary. Some felt responsibility toward the younger species of the galaxy, species that would need guidance should the entity ever threaten again. And our activation of this facility signaled these remaining humans. Daehyun asked. Yes, your actions have initiated the convergence protocol. The conservators, those who remained in physical form, have begun to return from their hidden outposts throughout the galaxy. And the sleepers, those who chose to remain in suspended animation rather than ascend, are awakening in their secret sanctuaries. A soft chime sounded throughout the chamber, and the hologram looked upward. They are here. Before Daehyun or Juwu could respond, a transport beam enveloped them, not the harsh, disorienting energy of standard teleportation technology, but a gentle, warm light that seemed to dissolve their physical forms without discomfort. For a moment that stretched beyond normal perception, they existed as patterns rather than matter, awareness without body. Then, just as gently, they reformed, and suddenly Daehyun and Juwu found themselves in what appeared to be a control center. The circular room was filled with technology both recognizable and utterly alien. Display screens showed various worlds across the galaxy, focusing particularly on the reaction to the appearance of the massive vessels. Other displays showed data streams too complex to comprehend, flowing in patterns that suggested communication on multiple levels simultaneously. But what held their attention were the beings who stood before them. 7 individuals that matched the hologram's appearance. Bipedal with varied skin tones ranging from pale cream to deep brown, and no scales or exoskeletons. Their height varied slightly around an average that was similar to Cerulean's, though their build was generally more slender. Their faces featured 2 forward-facing eyes in colors spanning from deep brown to pale blue, small noses of varying shapes, and mouths that currently formed what they recognized from their research as expressions of interest and welcome. Their clothing was simple but elegant, form-fitting garments in subdued colors that seemed to shimmer slightly with embedded technology. No visible weapons, no displays of rank or status. Their eyes reflecting intelligence and something more profound, a depth of experience that suggested ages beyond their apparent physical maturity. "We heard you were looking for us," one of them said, stepping forward. His voice was rich and warm, speaking their language perfectly though with an accent neither had heard before. "I am Hyunki, conservator of the Third Watch, and you have awakened humanity from its long slumber." Daehyun stared, momentarily unable to speak. Everything they had theorized, everything they had risked their careers and lives to discover, stood before them in living confirmation. These weren't holographic projections or preserved specimens. These were living humans, members of a species believed to be mere myth. How is this possible?" he finally managed. "The text suggested your civilization existed over 40,000 years ago." Hyunki smiled, the expression crinkling the skin around his eyes in a way that conveyed genuine warmth. Time becomes somewhat flexible when you understand how to step partially outside conventional spacetime. For us, it has been both millennia and merely moments since we entered our observation posts. Another human, a female with dark skin and closely cropped hair, stepped forward. "I am Sunny, conservator of the Deep Archives. Your persistence in seeking truth despite opposition impressed us. Few in your generation have shown such dedication to knowledge for its own sake." Ju found her voice, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. "The vessels appearing throughout the galaxy. They're all human ships. Why reveal yourselves now, after staying hidden for so long?" "The signal you activated was designed to alert us when a species had advanced enough to discover our existence independently," Hyunki explained. "It's a marker of both technological capability and intellectual curiosity, essential traits for what comes next." "What comes next?" Daehyun echoed, his scales flickering with apprehension. A third human, older in appearance with silver-streaked hair, joined the conversation. "The containment field holding the entity is weakening. It was never meant to last forever, only long enough for the younger species to mature sufficiently to join in its maintenance. The time has come for the races of this galaxy to work together on the next phase of protection." The main display shifted to show a visualization of what appeared to be a membrane between dimensions, glowing with energy but showing signs of strain and thinning in multiple areas. "Your discovery has accelerated our timetable," Sumi added. "But perhaps that's for the best. The Galactic Council needs to understand what they face, both the threat and the opportunity." "They'll never believe us," Ju said, thinking of their previous rejection by the Council. "They dismissed all our evidence as myth or misinterpretation." Hyunki's expression turned slightly mischievous. "I think recent events have made them more open to reconsidering their position. But you're right. Words alone won't be sufficient." He gestured toward one of the displays, which showed the emergency council session still in progress. The representatives appeared to be arguing heatedly, fear evident in their body language. "They need to hear the truth directly from its source," Hyunki continued, "which is why we're on our way to the council chambers now." "We?" Daehyun asked. "All of us," Hyunki confirmed. "You too have earned the right to present the truth you fought so hard to discover." and we will stand beside you as living proof of that truth." The ship around them hummed with power as it traveled through space in ways that defied conventional physics. Distance became meaningless as the vessel moved not just through space, but partially outside it, taking shortcuts through the underlying fabric of reality. "There's so much we want to ask you," Ju said, her mind brimming with questions about human history, technology, biology, and culture. Sumi smiled understandingly, "And we will answer everything we can. But first, we must address the immediate situation. Your civilization stands at a crossroads. The knowledge you've helped uncover will transform your understanding of the galaxy and your place in it. What exactly is happening across the galaxy right now?" Daehyun asked, gesturing toward displays showing the massive vessels positioned near populated worlds. "Those ships, are they preparing for conflict with this entity?" "No," Hyunki replied, his expression serious. "They're preparing potential evacuation points if needed, and establishing communication nodes to connect with the ascended humans who exist beyond conventional spacetime. The entity remains contained for now, but preparation is essential." The silver-haired human spoke again. "More importantly, they serve as undeniable evidence that we exist. Your council couldn't dismiss ancient texts and archaeological findings. They can hardly ignore massive ships appearing simultaneously across known space." Ju studied the displays showing various worlds reacting to the vessel's appearance. People seemed frightened. A natural reaction to the unknown. Sumi acknowledged. "But we've made no threatening moves. We appear formidable because we must be. Protecting the dimensional barrier requires tremendous energy. But humanity has never sought domination. Even at the height of our civilization, we valued cooperation over conquest." The ship's ambient lighting shifted slightly, and Hyunki glanced at a display. "We're approaching the council world. It's time to prepare for a historic meeting." He looked directly at Daehyun and Juwoo, respect evident in his expression. "Your perseverance has brought this moment to pass, a reunion between humanity and the younger races we once watched over. Whatever happens next, know that you have accomplished something remarkable." As the ship decelerated, entering normal space near the council world, Daehyun and Juwoo moved to a viewing portal. Below them, the gleaming planet that served as the seat of galactic governance grew larger. Around it, defensive ships had formed a protective perimeter, a futile gesture against the technology the human vessel possessed, but one Hyunki had instructed his people not to challenge. "They're hailing us," Sunny reported, monitoring communications. "Respond with peaceful intentions," Hyunki directed, "and prepare for transport directly to the council chamber." He turned to Daehyun and Juwoo. "Ready to make history?" They nodded, scales shifting to display a complex mix of excitement, apprehension, and pride. After all their struggles, after being dismissed and discredited, they were about to present the council with proof that could not be denied. The mythical humans were real, and more importantly, they had returned at a crucial moment for all galactic civilization. The transport beam began to glow around them once more, preparing to send them directly into the heart of galactic governance. The moment of revelation had arrived. The Galactic Security Council's chamber fell silent as Daehyun finished presenting his findings, flanked by Juwoo and two humans, Hyunki and his colleague Sunmi. The enormous circular hall, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of worlds, had never been so still. The soft hum of the environmental systems seemed thunderous in the silence. Thousands of eyes, some multifaceted, some with horizontal pupils, some glowing with bioluminescence, all focused on the two humans standing calmly beside the Zrillion archaeologists, living proof of what had been dismissed as myth for generations. The evidence was irrefutable now, with living representatives standing before them. The detailed records from the phase-shifting world, the technology that defied current understanding, and most convincingly, the massive vessels still positioned near major systems throughout the galaxy, all pointed to the same incredible truth. Elder Counselor Minji, her purple scales now pale with shock, was the first to recover her composure. She leaned forward in her ceremonial seat, her voice wavering slightly as she addressed the humans directly for the first time. If what you say is true, why did your kind withdraw from galactic affairs? Why hide your existence? She asked. For generations, our scholars might have benefited from your knowledge. Our struggles might have been eased by your technology. Around the chamber, representatives nodded and murmured in agreement. Many appeared troubled by the implications. Had they been watched, studied, perhaps even guided without their knowledge? Sami stepped forward, her movements graceful and assured. Her dark skin contrasted with the simple white garment she wore, clothing devoid of rank insignia or decoration, yet somehow conveying dignity through its very simplicity. After achieving what you would call technological singularity, most of humanity chose to ascend to a different plane of existence, she explained, her voice clear and measured. Our physical limitations fell away. Our understanding expanded beyond conventional reality. But we recognized that evolution follows many paths. The galaxy needed to develop without being overshadowed by our achievements or intimidated by our capabilities. She gestured toward the various species represented in the chamber. Would your cultures have developed their unique philosophies, arts, and sciences if humanity had remained as a dominant presence? Or would you have simply adopted our ways, becoming echoes rather than unique voices in the galactic chorus? Daehyun watched the council members consider this, seeing uncertainty replace indignation on many faces. Beside him, Ju stood tall, her scales bright with vindication after months of being dismissed and ridiculed. We left markers, Hyunki added, his voice deeper than Sunmi's but equally calm. Stories, artifacts, ruins, breadcrumbs for species with the curiosity and courage to follow them. We watched and waited for someone to recognize the truth behind the myths. He nodded respectfully toward Daehyun and Juwoo. These two demonstrated that rare combination of scientific rigor and imaginative openness that signals true readiness for advanced knowledge. They persisted despite institutional resistance, following evidence where it led rather than where convention dictated. Professor Taiho, who had once dismissed Daehyun's findings with casual arrogance, now rose from his seat. His scales showed the blue-green pattern of humility and contrition, a biological admission of error that all Zrillians recognized. And now, he asked, his earlier skepticism replaced by scientific fascination. Why return at this moment? What has changed? The display behind the humans activated, showing a visualization of what appeared to be a membrane between dimensions, glowing with energy but showing signs of strain and weakness at multiple points. Now we return, not as conquerors or saviors, but as partners, Sunmi explained, gesturing toward the display. The challenges facing this galaxy in the coming millennia will require cooperation between all sentient species. The dimensional barrier containing what you would call the Great Darkness, what we name the entity, requires maintenance and eventually replacement. This threat, is it imminent? Asked military advisor Seojin, his posture tense with new concern. Not imminent by your standards, Hyunki assured him. But preparation must begin now. The barrier will hold for perhaps another century before critical degradation occurs. Building a replacement, one that will last for millennia rather than millennia, requires technologies that must be developed cooperatively. No single species, not even humanity at our height, can maintain such a construct alone. The council chamber erupted in discussions, questions coming from all directions. The humans answered with patience and clarity, explaining complex concepts in terms each species could understand. Daehyun and Juwoo added context from their research, bridging the gap between human knowledge and current galactic understanding. As the session extended into its fifth hour, Elder Counselor Minji called for order. It seems clear, she announced when quiet returned, that we face both a challenge and an opportunity unlike any in our recorded history. I propose a formal cooperative agreement between the Galactic Council and humanity, with joint research initiatives, cultural exchange programs, and defensive preparations. The vote was unanimous, the first such unanimous decision in the Council's 3,000-year history. In the months that followed, humanity shared some of their knowledge, carefully, responsibly, while integrating into a galactic community that had thought them mere legends. Their ships remained near major worlds, but now as welcome guardians rather than mysterious sentinels. Human representatives joined diplomatic missions, scientific expeditions, and cultural gatherings throughout known space. The phase-shifting world, revealed to be Earth itself under a protective dimensional field, became a center for cultural and scientific exchange. The ancient cities were gradually restored, their impossible architecture once again housing life and purpose. Representatives from dozens of species walked streets designed for human feet, studying in learning centers built 40,000 years earlier, marveling at the seamless blend of beauty and function in every structure. Daehyun, once ridiculed, was now recognized as the bridge between two eras of galactic history. His persistence had connected two threads of time, bringing together the ancient past and the urgent present. The Council formally restored his academic credentials with special honors, establishing a new Institute of Interspecies Archaeology, with Daehyun as its director. As he stood on a balcony overlooking one of the restored human cities, 6 months after that historic council meeting, Ju joined him. The sunset painted the crystalline towers with golden light, their surfaces shifting subtly as Earth continued its controlled phase shifting, now regulated to maintain stability while allowing access. "Was it what you expected?" she asked, her scales glowing with contentment and wonder. "When you first found those manuscripts?" Daehyun considered the question, watching as hover transports moved between buildings, carrying researchers and diplomats from 24 worlds. Below, in what had once been an abandoned plaza, a garden of plants from various worlds now flourished, a living symbol of the new cooperation. "Nothing could have prepared me for this," he admitted finally. "The scale of their achievements, the depth of their planning, it's beyond anything I imagined. But what amazes me most isn't their technology or longevity." "What then?" Ju asked, genuinely curious. He gestured toward a courtyard where a group of humans was teaching Zrillion children about art. The children's scales flickered with excitement as they created paintings using both traditional Zrillion techniques and human methods thousands of years old yet new to them. It's that despite their capabilities, their greatest strength was never physical at all. It was their curiosity, their imagination, their determination to understand the universe, the same qualities that led us to find them. Ju nodded thoughtfully. The texts were right about that. They described humans as physically fragile compared to many species, yet capable of overcoming any obstacle through innovation and cooperation. "And persistence," added Daehyun with a smile. "Let's not forget the stubborn refusal to accept conventional wisdom when evidence points elsewhere." They watched as Hyunki approached, carrying what appeared to be an ancient book bound in material that had somehow survived millennia without degradation. His expression held the same gentle humor they had come to associate with him over months of working together. "We kept copies of your people's earliest stories about us," he said, handing the book to Daehyun. "We monitored how our memory transformed in your cultural records over time. You might find it interesting that they got some things right and others wonderfully wrong." Daehyun opened the book carefully, finding illustrations that depicted humans as giant beings who could command the elements, or as shapeshifters who could take the form of any creature, or as immortal spirits who lived in the stars themselves. "Not entirely wrong," Sumi commented, joining them on the balcony. "After Ascension, some of us did develop abilities that might appear magical from a conventional perspective. But these stories," she pointed to an illustration showing humans lifting mountains with their bare hands, "these were delightful exaggerations. All myths contain kernels of truth," Ju observed, "wrapped in layers of imagination. Like your stories of the star demons who supposedly created the void of Hyun," Hyunki noted. "A distorted memory of the entity, passed down through generations until it became something quite different." "Will you tell us the true story someday?" Daehyun asked. "The complete history of humanity, the entity, the ascension." Everything. Humke's expression grew thoughtful. Some knowledge must be earned through discovery rather than simply given. But yes, in time, as your civilizations continue to grow and mature, the full story will be shared. As they laughed together, human, Zrillion, scientist, and myth made real. A ship rose from the spaceport below, its design a collaboration between human architects and engineers from 5 different worlds. It climbed toward the stars, carrying the first joint expedition to study the dimensional barrier directly. Watching it ascend, Daehyun felt a profound sense of rightness. The universe had always been vaster and stranger than anyone had imagined, filled with wonders and dangers beyond conventional understanding. But now, at least, they would face those wonders and dangers together. The younger races standing alongside the returned guardians of an ancient legacy. The stars seemed a little brighter, the future a little more promising, and the galaxy a little less lonely. The myths had become real, and reality had proven more extraordinary than any myth could have suggested. In the great library being established in the heart of the restored city, Daehyun's original translations of the ancient manuscripts were displayed prominently, a reminder that truth often hides in plain sight, waiting for those curious enough to recognize it and brave enough to pursue it wherever it leads. And somewhere beyond conventional spacetime, the ascended majority of humanity watched with interest as a new chapter in galactic history began, one they had anticipated for 40,000 years, waiting for the moment when the younger races would be ready to join them in the greater community of conscious beings that span not just the galaxy, but reality itself. Thanks for watching.